The first hint of sunrise had barely reached the edge of the sky when Dr. Daniel Hayes was pulled from sleep by a sound that didn't belong, echoing through the wooden walls of his small research cabin deep inside Kenya's Tsavo National Park. At 52, the wildlife veterinarian had long grown used to waking with Africa. Elephant calls rolling across the plains, hyenas slipping back from the night, birds filling the air with layered sound as the day began. But this sound was none of those. It came again, measured, steady, intentional. Thud, thud, thud. Daniel sat up and checked his watch. 5:22 a.m. The knocking didn't stop. It pressed on, urgent and insistent, vibrating through the cabin walls like something demanding to be answered. In all his years stationed at this isolated conservation post, nothing had ever sounded like this. He swung his legs off the narrow cot and pulled on the same dust-stained khaki pants he'd worn the day before. Clean clothes were a luxury out here. Function mattered more than appearance. He reached for his old baseball cap, a faded reminder of a life he rarely revisited but never fully left behind. The knocking continued, sharper now, as if whoever stood outside knew he was awake. Daniel moved toward the door carefully, possibilities colliding in his mind. Poachers? Doubtful. They worked silently and never announced themselves. A lost traveler? Impossible. The nearest road lay far beyond walking distance. As his hand hovered over the latch, something unsettled him. The rhythm. Too consistent, too deliberate to be random. It tugged at a memory he couldn't quite place. He took a breath and pulled the door open. No human stood on the porch. Instead, Daniel found himself face to face with a pair of dark, intelligent eyes. Eyes that belonged to something entirely unexpected. A baby elephant stood alone in the pale morning light. The calf couldn't have been more than 6 months old. Sparse hair still clung to its wrinkled gray skin. Its small trunk hung slightly to one side, clumsy in the way all young elephants' trunks were. But it wasn't the calf's size that froze Daniel in place. It was the fact that it was alone. In all his years studying African elephants, this simply didn't happen. Calves didn't wander without their mothers. Herds didn't leave their young unguarded. For an elephant this small to be standing by itself meant only one thing. Something was terribly wrong. The calf looked directly at him, not startled, not afraid, aware. Slowly, it lifted its trunk and gently touched Daniel's outstretched hand. Then it turned, took a few steps away from the cabin, stopped, and looked back. When Daniel didn't move, the elephant returned to the door. The pattern repeated. Daniel's pulse quickened as understanding began to form. This wasn't a lost animal wandering by chance. The approach, the retreat, the eye contact, the touch, this was intention. Daniel had spent decades learning to read animals, to recognize distress even when it wasn't obvious. And every instinct he had built over those years pointed to the same conclusion. This baby elephant wasn't confused. It wasn't wandering. It needed help, just not in the way he had ever known before. The morning air was cool against Daniel's skin as he stepped fully outside, closing the cabin door behind him. Dust and dry grass carried the familiar scent of the savannah, but something beneath it felt different, charged, unsettled. He lowered himself slowly, kneeling to the elephant's level. Years of working with frightened and injured animals had taught him one rule above all others: never loom, never rush. Make yourself smaller, less threatening. The calf approached again, this time with more confidence. Its trunk rose, brushing gently against Daniel's cheek. Warm, soft, searching. A gesture he recognized, not fear, but reassurance. "What is it?" he murmured, his voice barely louder than the breeze slipping through the trees. "What do you need?" The elephant stepped back, then it turned toward the tree line. After a few deliberate steps, it stopped and looked over its shoulder. The message was unmistakable. "Follow me." Daniel hesitated. Following an elephant, even a calf, into the African wilderness was not a decision made lightly. A baby alone meant adults nearby, and adult elephants were fiercely protective. One wrong move could turn concern into catastrophe. There were protocols, rules, boundaries he was trained never to cross. His role was to observe, document, intervene only when absolutely necessary. Responding to what looked like an invitation from a wild animal sat far outside standard procedure. But when Daniel met the calf's gaze again, procedure felt irrelevant. This wasn't wandering. This wasn't curiosity. This was urgency. The elephant didn't run ahead. It didn't disappear into the trees. It waited, still, patient, watching him as if it understood the weight of the choice he was making. Daniel felt the familiar pull of a life he had once left behind. A quiet clinic, predictable days, conversations that didn't carry the risk of death. He had walked away from all of it years ago, driven by a need he could never fully explain. And now, standing in the early light with a baby elephant waiting on him, the reason felt painfully clear. He turned back inside. Within moments, he returned carrying his field medical kit, 2 water bottles, and a handheld radio. He adjusted the brim of his cap, took one last look at the cabin, and nodded toward the waiting calf. "All right," he said quietly. "Show me." The elephant responded instantly. It turned and began moving toward the forest, not fast, but with purpose. Every few meters, it paused to make sure Daniel was still behind it. They entered the eucalyptus trees together, light breaking into shifting patterns across the forest floor. Daniel marked his position on the radio as they walked, habit and caution guiding his movements. The deeper they went, the more the forest changed. Birdsong thinned, insects quieted, and then Daniel heard it. Low, broken, heavy with strain. His instincts tightened. It was a sound no wildlife veterinarian ever wanted to hear. Distress. The calf quickened its pace. Ahead, the trees opened into a small clearing. The elephant stopped at its edge and turned back toward Daniel, eyes fixed on his face. "This is why I came," the look seemed to say. Daniel stepped forward, heart pounding, medical kit ready, completely unprepared for what waited beyond the trees. The clearing opened abruptly, and Daniel stopped. At its center yawned a deep pit, wide, steep, reinforced with stone. A trap, not crude, not accidental, built with intention. At the bottom lay an adult female elephant. Her massive body was twisted at an unnatural angle. One front leg bent sharply beneath her weight. The ground around her was torn and dark, marked by desperate attempts to climb free. Broken branches and scraped earth told the story clearly. She had been here a long time. She was alive, but barely. A low, aching sound rose from her chest, heavy with pain and exhaustion. Daniel felt it in his bones. This wasn't alarm, this wasn't communication, it was suffering. The calf rushed to the edge of the pit, reaching down with its small trunk. The mother responded immediately, lifting her own despite the strain, releasing a soft, rumbling sound meant to soothe. Daniel knelt, scanning the scene with trained precision. Dehydration, severe trauma, a fracture he didn't need instruments to confirm. The pit was too deep, the walls too sheer. No elephant, healthy or not, could escape alone. This was no accident. Around the pit, signs told another story. Small trenches, dragged leaves, damp vegetation pressed into the dirt. The calf had tried to help, had tried to feed her, had tried to dig, and when that failed, it had done something extraordinary. It had come for him. Daniel reached for his radio, already knowing one thing with certainty: this rescue would not wait. Daniel's radio crackled once, then went silent. Help was coming, but not fast enough. He relayed coordinates, injuries, urgency. The response was calm, professional, and distant. Heavy equipment, veterinary support, hours away. Too many hours. The mother elephant's breathing grew shallow. Each rise of her chest took effort. The calf remained at the pit's edge, unmoving, reaching down whenever it could, refusing to leave. Daniel stayed with them. He rationed water, marked time, watched for shock. There was little else he could do. No strength, no tools to move something this massive. Only presence. The calf sensed the change. When Daniel finished the call, it stepped toward him and touched his hand again. This time, the meaning was clear. Not a request, not fear, trust. Daniel looked back toward the forest path, knowing the next sound he heard would decide everything. The sound of engines reached the clearing before the vehicles appeared. Daniel exhaled for the first time in hours. The rescue team arrived with controlled urgency, machinery, ropes, medical gear moving into place with practiced precision. There was no celebration, no relief yet, only focus. The calf stiffened at the noise, uncertain. Daniel stayed close, calming it with low tones and steady movements until it understood these humans weren't a threat. The mother was sedated carefully, enough to ease pain, not enough to steal awareness. Every calculation mattered. One mistake could end her life. The pit dictated everything. Its walls were unstable, forcing the team to work from a distance. Standard methods wouldn't work. A custom sling was assembled, designed to carry her weight without stressing the broken leg. When the lift began, time slowed. Steel cables tightened. The ground held. The elephant shifted instinctively, using her strength where she still could, working with the pull instead of fighting it. Then, solid ground. The moment her feet touched earth, the calf rushed forward. Trunks met. Low rumbles passed between them. Relief, reassurance, life. But the rescue wasn't over. Treatment began immediately. The leg was stabilized, fluids administered, every step measured against the risk of shock. Through it all, the calf never left her side, and neither did Daniel. As the afternoon light softened, the rescue shifted into its final phase. The mother elephant was stable enough to move, though her steps would be slow for weeks to come. Using radio signals and tracking data, the team located her herd nearby, still searching, still waiting. When the elephants emerged from the trees, the air changed. The family surrounded the injured mother at once, touching her gently, checking her scent, confirming she was alive. Another group turned their attention to the calf, inspecting it carefully, as if counting every breath it had taken while gone. Then the matriarch stepped forward. She approached Daniel without fear, her massive form calm and deliberate. Her trunk reached out, brushing the air around him, reading him, measuring him. After a long moment, she stepped back and released a low, resonant sound. Acceptance. The herd began to move. As they disappeared into the trees, the calf lingered. It turned back once more and approached Daniel, lifting its trunk to his face. Soft, familiar, intentional. A goodbye. Daniel stood alone in the clearing as the forest slowly reclaimed its silence. The crisis had ended, but something else had begun. What started as knocking on a door had become a crossing of boundaries between species, between instinct and understanding. And Daniel knew he would never hear that sound the same way again. If stories like this matter to you, don't let them go unnoticed. These moments only survive when people choose to care, when they choose to watch, and when they choose to share. Support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. It helps more real stories from the wild reach the people who need to see them.